Partisans tried to board them. A German Panzerzug wasn't just a weapon, it was a mobile security force, carrying reconnaissance scouts who could dismount and patrol ahead, railway repair teams with all their equipment, combat engineers, flamethrower squads for clearing bunkers or forest positions, and enough firepower to fight off anything short of a concentrated armor attack. These trains patrolled thousands of miles of occupied railway, hunting partisan groups, protecting supply convoys, responding to attacks on German positions. But the railways themselves became battlefields, and partisan saboteurs were the invisible enemy that terrified every train crew. Partisans would bury mines under the tracks, sometimes captured German mines, sometimes improvised explosives made from unexploded bombs, sometimes just artillery shells rigged with pressure triggers. German trains developed elaborate countermeasures. Dogs trained to detect explosives, soldiers with improvised metal detectors walking ahead of trains in dangerous areas, armored push cars that ran ahead of the locomotive to trigger mines before they could damage the main engine. On one mission, a German Panzerzug crawls forward through partisan-controlled forest, its commander ordering reduced speed because intelligence reports indicate sabotage activity in this sector. Scouts have checked the tracks but found nothing, yet everyone aboard feels the tension, that knowledge that death could be buried under any meter of rail. Engineers watch the tracks through armored slits, searching for disturbances in the gravel, unusual shadows, anything that suggests tampering. The locomotive crosses a suspicious patch where the ballast looks slightly disturbed, and for one heartbeat nothing happens. Maybe the scouts were right, maybe there's nothing here, and then the world explodes. The mine detonates directly under a supply car, the blast lifting the entire wagon off the rails, flipping it sideways in a shriek of tearing metal and shattering wood. The coupling breaks, separating the train into two pieces. The locomotive lurches forward, its driver instinctively throttling up before realizing he's left half his train behind. The derailed car burns, ammunition inside cooking off in staccato bursts. And from the forest, partisan snipers open fire, their shots pinging off armor, searching for vision slits and gun ports. The surviving gunners traverse their weapons blindly, firing into the treeline without clear targets, just suppressive fire meant to keep the partisans' heads down while engineers scramble out with tools and spare rails, attempting to repair the damage under fire because if they can't fix the track, they'll have to abandon the train. And abandoning an armored train means leaving tons of weapons and ammunition for the enemy. But the true legendary moment, the story that separates myth from history, belongs to the Soviets and involves a feat that sounds physically impossible: a fully armored train outrunning fighter aircraft. The scenario develops like this. A Soviet armored train is moving through occupied territory, making a supply run to a besieged city, when German reconnaissance spots it. The Luftwaffe scrambles a squadron of Bf-109 fighters, among the fastest, most maneuverable aircraft in the German arsenal, each armed with 20mm cannons and machine guns specifically designed to destroy ground targets. The fighters arrive in formation, diving from altitude, their pilots confident this will be a quick kill. Trains can't dodge, can't hide, can barely shoot back effectively. It should be target practice. The squadron leader rolls into his attack run, dropping low, lining up the locomotive in his gun sight, thumb moving to the firing trigger. Then the Soviet commander makes a decision that's either brilliant or insane. Instead of stopping to maximize anti-aircraft fire, he orders full throttle. The locomotive engineer looks at him like he's lost his mind. They're already moving fast, the armored train weighs hundreds of tons, the tracks through this section have curves that become dangerous at high speed, but orders are orders, so the engineer opens the throttle to maximum. The engine screams, its pistons hammering like machine guns, steam pressure pushing into the red zone, the entire train beginning to shake as it accelerates beyond safe speeds. Sparks fly from the wheels where they slip against rails. The cars sway violently on their suspensions. Soldiers inside grab onto straps, handrails, anything bolted down, because the motion feels like the train might tear itself apart. Meanwhile, the anti-aircraft gunners brace themselves against their weapons and open fire. Not carefully aimed shots, but continuous streams of tracer fire that fill the sky with steel. The Bf-109 squadron leader fires his first burst, sees his rounds spark off the locomotive's armor, then has to pull up hard as the train's flak fills his windscreen with explosions. He climbs, banks around for another pass, but when he lines up again the train has accelerated even more, It's hitting 80 kilometers per hour now, an absolutely insane speed for a fully armored convoy, faster than many aircraft can safely fly at low altitude while maneuvering. The fighter tries to match the train's speed while flying low enough to shoot accurately, but it's nearly impossible. The train is too fast, too heavy with momentum, and it's not traveling in a straight line. It's following the curves of the railway, which means the fighters can't simply fly straight and maintain a firing solution. One wrong turn by the train at this speed means derailment and catastrophic destruction. But slowing down means the fighters will tear them apart. So the Soviet commander keeps screaming, "Full steam! Don't stop!" even as they hit curves that make the cars lean at terrifying angles. A young gunner, maybe 19 years old, stands at his anti-aircraft mount firing continuously until the barrel glows cherry red and the heat makes the air shimmer around it. His face streaked with sweat and powder residue, hands bleeding from gripping hot metal, but he doesn't stop because those aircraft cannot be allowed to line up another run. In the locomotive cab, a mechanic works frantically on a steam line that started leaking under the strain, tightening bolts with a wrench while the entire engine shakes beneath him, while bombs explode close enough to shower the locomotive with dirt and shrapnel. His hands moving with practiced precision because if this line fails, the engine loses pressure and the train dies. The commander stands at his observation post, wind whipping through a cracked vision slit, watching the fighters circle for another attempt, watching his gunners pour fire into the sky, watching the tracks blur past, and he knows they're riding the absolute edge of disaster. One weak rail, one poorly maintained curve, one moment of mechanical failure and they're all dead. But he keeps giving the same order, "Don't stop!" The fighters make 3 more passes, each one breaking off as flak forces them away, each one unable to maintain a stable firing position against a target that's moving this fast and fighting back this hard. The squadron leader, running low on ammunition and fuel, makes a final decision. The train has won. It's not worth losing aircraft to bring down. The Bf-109s peel away, climbing back toward their base, leaving the Soviet train still thundering down the rails, battered but alive, victorious in a battle that should have been impossible to survive. When the train finally slows and stops at a smoldering rail yard, mechanics climb down from the cars, their uniforms blackened with soot, hands shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. Gunners count the holes punched through armor plates, dozens of them, proof of how close they came to disaster. The commander walks the length of the train, running his hand along the scarred steel, touching it like he's thanking a living creature that chose not to die. This wasn't an isolated incident. Armored trains shaped Eastern Front warfare in ways that Western histories often ignore. They resupplied besieged cities like Leningrad, evacuated civilians from combat zones, transported tanks and artillery to breakthrough points, shot down German aircraft, broke through encirclements, and even served as mobile command posts for major operations. German trains fired across entire river valleys, their naval guns reaching targets that ground artillery couldn't touch. Soviet trains appeared behind German lines after partisan operations restored damaged tracks, bringing reinforcements that turned local defeats into victories. Both sides laid and repaired railways under fire, knowing that the war moved only as fast as the rails allowed, that controlling the tracks meant controlling logistics, and controlling logistics meant surviving. But nothing lasts forever, especially in war. As the conflict intensified, aircraft became too fast, their weapons too powerful. Railways became too vulnerable. A single destroyed bridge could halt an entire supply line, and both sides had aircraft specifically designed to destroy rail infrastructure. Tanks grew more maneuverable, able to traverse terrain that trains could never reach. The armored trains era was ending, though few wanted to admit it. The end came in fire and twisted metal, in derailments and bombings and sabotage operations. A German Panzerzug makes its final run through Poland in 1945, retreating ahead of the Soviet advance, when Soviet artillery, guided by spotter aircraft, obliterates the rails half a kilometer ahead of the train. The locomotive engineer sees the destruction too late, tries to brake, but there's no stopping hundreds of tons of armored steel moving at speed. The locomotive hits the gap and simply falls, tumbling down an embankment, dragging the cars behind it. They flip through the air like toys, armor plates tearing free, weapons ripping from their mounts, the entire train disintegrating in a cascade of destruction that lasts less than 10 seconds, but erases months of engineering and years of operational history. After the war, most armored trains were scrapped, their armor plates cut up for other uses, their weapons remounted in static positions, their locomotives returned to civilian service or simply abandoned. But in a forest clearing somewhere in Eastern Europe, a rusted armored wagon sits where it was left decades ago. Vines growing over the gun ports, trees pushing up through the floor, nature reclaiming what war created. Someone, maybe a veteran, maybe a historian, maybe just someone who understands what these machines represented, has placed a plaque beside it, the brass turned green with age, the letters reading, "This train once fought like a battleship," because in a war dominated by tanks and planes, the railroads held their own steel champions. Massive, roaring, unstoppable machines that could race through firestorms, outrun fighters, and bring hope to besieged cities. They were monsters built from necessity, weapons that should have been obsolete before they were even deployed. Yet they fought with a ferocity that earned respect from both sides. The armored trains of World War II represented something primal about warfare. The idea that if you can mount a gun on it, if you can armor it, if you can make it move toward the enemy, then it becomes a weapon regardless of what it was originally designed to do. They were trains that refused to be merely transportation, locomotives that became combatants, rolling fortresses that fought until the world changed around them and made them obsolete. And for a few desperate years on the Eastern Front, they were exactly what both sides needed: mobile firepower that could appear anywhere steel rails existed, fight like a static strongpoint, then vanish down the tracks before the enemy could respond. The train that fought like a battleship. It sounds impossible until you see the photographs, read the combat reports, touch the scarred armor that somehow still exists in forgotten corners of Europe. Then you understand. These machines were real, their battles were real, and for a brief moment in history, the railways themselves became warriors in steel. A train that fought like a battleship. A line that sounds impossible until you meet the armored trains of World War II. Steel rails cutting across endless forests, snow turning to steam under hot engines. A monstrous locomotive wrapped in riveted armor plates thundering into battle like a land battleship. This is where the story begins, on the Eastern Front where distances were measured in thousands of miles, and the only thing faster than retreat was the railway. A Soviet armored train races across the steppe, its engine bellowing black smoke into gray skies. When the sound comes, that distinctive scream of Stuka dive bombers dropping from the clouds like mechanical vultures. The Germans have found their target. The Stukas roll into their attack dives, sirens wailing, bombs visible under their wings, pilots lining up what should be an easy kill. A train can't dodge, can't maneuver, can't do anything but die on the tracks. Except this train doesn't die. Instead, it fights back with a fury that surprises even the attacking pilots. Quadruple anti-aircraft guns mounted on flat cars swivel skyward, their barrels tracking the diving aircraft with mechanical precision. Then they open fire, a wall of flak that turns the air into a storm of steel and explosives, tracer rounds arcing upward in brilliant streams, shells bursting in black flowers around the diving Stukas. The lead aircraft pulls up hard, its bomb falling wide, cratering the earth 50 meters from the tracks. The second Stuka tries to press the attack, but takes hits along its wing, shrapnel punching through aluminum, forcing the pilot to break off trailing smoke. The third doesn't even complete its dive, banking away as soon as the flak starts reaching toward it. The train keeps moving, keeps firing, its guns tracking the retreating aircraft until they're out of range, and then it just continues on its mission, unstoppable, unafraid, a steel serpent that refuses to be killed from the sky. This was the reality of armored trains on the Eastern Front, mobile fortresses that fought like warships but moved on rails, and understanding why they existed requires understanding the unique nightmare of warfare in Russia and Eastern Europe. Roads weren't roads in the Western sense. They were dirt tracks that turned to impassable mud every spring and autumn, sucking vehicles down to their axles, stranding entire tank divisions in seas of frozen or liquefied earth. Fuel was perpetually scarce. Distances were absolutely gigantic. Moscow to Stalingrad alone is over 600 miles, and moving supplies by truck was slow, vulnerable, and fuel-intensive. But railways worked. Railways had existed across Russia and Eastern Europe for decades, tough steel arteries that connected cities, industrial centers, and military bases. Trains could move hundreds of men, dozens of artillery pieces, mountains of ammunition and supplies faster than any tank column could dream of traveling. More importantly, they could do it using coal or wood-fired locomotives that didn't require precious petroleum. So whoever controlled the tracks controlled the front lines, controlled supply routes, controlled the strategic tempo of entire campaigns. And both the Soviets and Germans realized almost immediately that if railways were that important, they needed to be defended and weaponized. The construction of these machines bordered on the insane. Take a massive locomotive, already weighing hundreds of tons, and encase it in angled armor plates thick enough to stop rifle fire and shell fragments, sometimes even anti-tank rounds. Behind the locomotive, couple specialized cars, artillery wagons mounting turrets literally hacked from T-34 tanks or salvaged from naval destroyers, giving the train 76mm or even 100mm main guns that could engage ground targets miles away. Flak cars bristling with quadruple anti-aircraft guns, the same weapons that protected Soviet cities from Luftwaffe bombers, now mounted on railway flat cars where they could protect the train itself. Infantry cars with reinforced walls pierced by firing ports, allowing dozens of soldiers to shoot from relative safety while the train was moving or stationary. Command cars equipped with radio systems powerful enough to coordinate entire divisions, turning the train into a mobile headquarters. Some Soviet trains even carried mortars, flamethrowers, scout motorcycles that could be unloaded for reconnaissance, and railway repair equipment so the train could fix its own tracks under fire. The whole machine became a rolling fortress, each car a bunker, the entire assembly a giant serpent of steel that could appear anywhere rails existed, fight like a stationary strongpoint, then vanish down the tracks before enemy forces could concentrate against it. The Soviets embraced armored trains with particular enthusiasm, building dozens of them with names that became legendary: Kozma Minin, for the motherland, Stalin's death, Iron Felix. These weren't just defensive weapons. Soviet doctrine deployed them offensively, using trains as mobile fire support platforms that could race along tracks parallel to advancing infantry, providing artillery support that moved as fast as the attack itself. Picture a Soviet armored train, let's call it BP-43, one of the real designation systems, charging into battle along forested tracks in Belorussia. German infantry has been attempting to blow the railway, planting demolition charges on a bridge, working frantically because they know a Soviet train has been reported moving up this line. But the train arrives faster than intelligence predicted, rounding a curve at full throttle, its commander having pushed the engine to maximum speed, precisely to catch the Germans before they can complete their sabotage. The Germans see it coming. This massive metal beast belching smoke, armor plates gleaming, gun barrels already traversing toward them, and some try to run while others desperately finish arming their explosives. The train's main gun fires first, a 76mm shell that screams across the 300 meters separating them and detonates among the German engineers, the explosion throwing bodies and equipment into the air. Before the echo fades, the train's machine guns open up, heavy Degtyaryovs sweeping the embankment, tracers ripping through undergrowth, catching Germans as they try to flee into the forest. The rails shake under the train's weight. More shells explode like thunder, each detonation a statement that this ground belongs to the railway now. And then, even before the train fully stops, infantry pour from the armored cars, Soviet soldiers using the train not just as artillery but as an assault transport, turning what looks like a defensive weapon into an offensive battering ram that can smash through German positions and immediately flood them with troops. From the German perspective, armored trains represented a different philosophy, typical Teutonic obsession with engineering perfection and multi-role functionality. The Panzerzüge units that patrolled occupied territories were technological marvels. Diesel-electric locomotives that could reverse at full speed without turning around, making them less vulnerable to ambush. Massive 20mm and 37mm anti-aircraft guns mounted in precisely engineered turrets. Armored couplers designed to prevent a single exploding car from disabling the entire train. Even booby-trapped cars that would detonate if